Kia ora, nau mai, haere mai, and welcome to another Aotearoa Rugby Pod. I'm Ross Carl, joined as always by James Parsons in Auckland and Bryn Hall as well. We've had a weekend without international football and plenty of solid domestic stuff in New Zealand. We had the FPC final. We've had a Ranfurly Shield game where Jimmy's cousin, well, he played an absolute barnstormer again, so we've got to give him 2 minutes of the show to wax lyrical about his cousin. We'll talk a little bit about Sam Cane and the All Blacks, about the USA, the Wallabies. Got a fair few things to get through in this show, but let's start with Sam Cane's return. It was pretty cool, I have to say, watching him on Sky, coming out for King Country and playing in a Heartland Championship game against Whanganui. Guys, let's start with you, Jipper. What did you make of Sam Cane's return, and what did you make of the idea of returning through Heartland Championship Rugby?
Oh, I think it was exciting for everyone. It certainly made me watch the game and see how he's tracking. But he looked pretty good. He would have been doing a lot of fitness work and no doubt nailing all his Broncos. But there's some reason when you do all that fitness work, it doesn't always transpire into that rugby fitness. So he would have got a lot out of it. And probably a good stepping stone for him heading into probably playing against the US. And he made a few typical Sam Cane turnovers and a couple of good carries, and got through the game. I think was probably the biggest goal. Is got through fine in his chest and pec. Sustain the impact, and as I said, gives them good lead up to the USA fixture.
Thinking about that kind of the return at a completely different level, Bryn. I mean, you've probably returned a couple of times through club rugby on your way to Super Rugby. Outside of just getting game time, what can you work on in games where structures are completely different and the standard is completely different?
Yeah, it is. I think, it's not the ideal preparation-wise that you would have in a normal week, but I think for Sam it would be more so just for him being able to get back on the field. You even saw with his post that he had 6 months off and was really looking forward to just getting the opportunity to get out and play. And those kind of games, you just want to get through what you need to do. So have a few runs, have a few tackles, get a few turnovers, get your body moving, just getting that game fitness. Because you can run as many broken Broncos fitness tests and MAS sessions, but that contact, back-to-back contact, and being able to get up and play game situation football is a lot different. And to be honest, in that kind of level, he's probably tend to do a little bit more as well. Covering guys' asses a little bit, and probably doing a little bit more than you would at Super Rugby. But that's good because it only adds to the fitness of being able to get that game fitness and probably doing a little bit more. So the fact that he didn't get injured and did a few things that they were accustomed to seeing Sam Cane do, it's probably a great result for him before getting that 40, 50 minutes before he goes over and plays a test match, hopefully against the Eagles coming up very shortly.
Is it easy to get your rhythm on in that environment, in the way that you normally would because of the differences in the way that the teams play?
I think the fact that he's he's a senior professional as well, so I think he's got a pretty good understanding of what his week looks like, or what his game will look like in his preparation to do that, even though it's not an ideal situation where you would usually in Super Rugby or even All Black environment. So the fact that he is experienced and has a good understanding of what his prep looks like for the game and how to get himself ready to be physically and mentally ready. So I think that would have been all good. He just would have had a few things that he wanted to nail up first and foremost. Getting some minutes in, getting the old lungs burning, getting a few tackles in, a few turnovers, what you do as number 7 going forward, and then getting off injury-free. And so all in all, it was a great day for him, and what a great day for King Country in that community to be able to have an All Black captain, again, running out with your King Country jersey on.
I think also, Ross, is his repeated efforts, is those back-to-back efforts. He might not be used or he might not be always within system, but it's those back-to-back efforts, getting back, getting set first, getting around the corner first. A couple of times he came around the corner and was probably in a really good position to carry, but unfortunately it wasn't nailed at the breakdown, so it was a turnover to Wanganui. But I think all those sorts of things, getting off the ground and those repeated efforts and those repeated sort of physically demanding roles would have been huge for him. And obviously he set out for 40 minutes and he came out into the second half, which everyone was pretty excited about. So he was obviously enjoying himself out there. He obviously felt good physically to keep going for another 10 or 15.
Yeah. Another All Black captain was quick to comment before that game, Buck Shelford, obviously an absolute legend, but he worried that, Sam, who's had a couple of serious injuries over the last couple of years, is only one injury away from it being the end. I feel like we've heard this before with Richie McCaw and concussions and Ben Smith and all these other people. Is that a fair comment, do you think, Bryn?
Oh, I think Buck's got a pretty good understanding around how physical our game is, but I think probably back in his time and where we've developed as a rugby community is around the concussions and being able to put those protocols in place to be able to play safely. So yes, Sam has obviously had a few head knocks and injuries, and like all players do, but obviously to the extent he's had a couple more than the usual. But there's great things in place with the All Blacks, the Chiefs, and the information and the kind of test that you do have to be able to put yourself in a position to play safely. And so, like I said, probably back in Bucks Day, they were tougher and being able to have the old kind of mindset around, I'll be all right, let's just get through it when they're going through, obviously, through concussion symptoms. But in this day and age, they're in a position to, first and foremost, put in the players' safety at first. And we tend to do that a lot now in this day and age. But again, he is right, though. One big smack, and the fact that he has had concussion problems in the past, there might be a possibility, but I think we have a really good understanding around there are things in place to be able to have player safety at the forefront.
I think as well, he's a proven solid healer. He himself puts it down to Dear Velvet. I don't know if that's always the case. I think it puts it a little bit down to his mental resilience. But I would never back against him in terms of coming back from any. I think any player is one knock away. The reality of our sport at the moment, it's physically demanding, or one injury away, whatever it may be. And I don't think it's healthy for players to think like that. You've just got to go out there and play. And he's in a really good mindset to keep playing that physical, abrasive game that we know and love. And I certainly would be betting against that comment just because of who he is and what he has come. The neck itself, that's such an impressive ability to come back and play test match level after that. And it just shows where he's at. And he knows his body best. The individuals know your body, and you know when you're right. And there's no way he'd go out on that field if he wasn't ready. And I don't think he'd ever go out on that rugby field thinking, I'm one knock away or one injury away. He's just not built like that.
The Dear Velvet, it's classic, isn't it? The old Bob Charles Dear Velvet. I looked into that at one point when I was a guy going to the gym and trying to get big, and I failed at that. But I got the Dear Velvet and I'd give it a spray in, and apparently the velvet grows so quickly, it's got growth hormones and all that kind of stuff. I suppose as professional rugby players, Bryn, you get a fair few of these magical concoctions get thrown at you by companies. Well, what's the funniest one that's come your way?
Oh, probably to the same extent. I think Ethan Blackadder was probably one. I can't remember off the top of my head, but he would something that with the cattle. He'd have something with that cattle have, and he'd say, "Yeah, I'd take that a couple of times a week," and that kind of stuff. Obviously, must have been a joke, but yeah, Ethan Blackadder. Yeah, if there's one guy you probably want to talk around when it comes to cattle or farm kind of ingredients, he's probably a man to try and connect with, and probably him and Scott Barrett actually. Him and Scott Barrett tend to have a few laughs around that kind of stuff.
Mate, I actually think there's something in Dear Velvet because leading into Tony Woodcock's last few years, he was a firm believer in the Dear Velvet. He reckoned it gave him extra years on his career. So I think there might be something in behind it. And I think Sam Cane's family produces the Dear Velvet he takes.
All right. Jesus, that's some good knowledge right there.
There you go. Oh, mate, Woody was on the same batch. He loves it. He raves about
it. Classic, absolutely classic. I think who was the golfer? Vijay Singh always used to get on the Dear Velvet as well. I think that he felt that was the living of his career through into his 50s or whenever he decided to switch to the senior tour.
Maybe that's something I need. Ross. I've missed out here first part of my career.
Yeah, I was just thinking maybe I could have taken some.
Take the Dear Velvet. This might only be the first third of your career.
We get a sponsor here, possibly. This could be a sponsor for us here, lads.
Yeah, Aotearoa Rugby Pod brought to you by Sam Cane's Dear Velvet. Sam, send us some cash, please. A couple of other guys. I'm sure Sam Whitelock would enjoy the Dear Velvet as well. He obviously had a pretty good comeback on the weekend. Jeppa, what did you make of him?
Oh, mate, massive as always. Goes the 82 minutes too. He's an absolute workhorse. What you expect from Sam and the lineouts and scrum. He's really effective in the defensive breakdowns as well. Loves getting his turnovers, loves a counter ruck. and just played his part in what was a really exciting game and an exciting finish, obviously going to Golden Point. So, look, I think he's not far off a gallop, and he'll be certainly suiting up, I think, against the USA.
And Dane Colesbryn, he also had a big part to play in that game.
Yeah, he did. He had some great carries, and had 11 tackles as well. So if you're talking around getting your mojo back in and doing the things that you need to do to be able to get ready to play international footy, the likes of Sam playing 18 minutes and Dane playing 47 minutes, it sets them up really, really well. And so, especially with a guy that of his age and understanding of what it is to play internationals, and it was great for him to be able to get through some minutes and being able to get those repeated efforts that Jibs talks around. There's only so much running and stuff you can do with teams and training. It's that kind of stuff when you are getting on the field and being able to implement things that you have done at trainings and your fitness and that stuff. So, yeah, it sets those three guys up really well. Both Sam's and Dane, to be able to put their best case forwards going into towards America coming up.
So do we expect all of those guys to play that American game, Jipper?
Yeah, absolutely, I do. I think it would be a great stepping stone into that end of year tour. I just wanted to say that it just shows how much Colesy loves to compete. I think during the week I read that he was only supposed to have 40 minutes. And when I saw him trot out in the second half, I just started laughing. He's definitely just said, nah, mate, I'm going back on. I'm getting back out there because, it was a tight tussle, and I think it was key for his side to have him out there a little bit longer. But, yeah, all those lads will get a run, and I think Frizzell as well. He'll get a run. Not too sure about Josh Lord. That might be an apprentice style sort of approach, but you never know. With the locks and how competitive it is, we haven't seen a lot of Tupou Vaa'i, and when he has played, he's been exceptional. Sam Whitelock coming back into the frame. So there is probably an opportunity for a bench role, but there might also be an opportunity to carry two loose forwards and one that can cover in that lock position.
Just want to pop back to the idea of Dane Coles going, nah, mate, I'm going back on. At what point do you have the mana within the team where you can tell the coach, these are my rules until I decide I'm coming off?
Mate, the coach would have wanted him out there. There's so many times 100%. Where the coach is probably told from medical staff, only 40 minutes. The coach will be going, Dane, you good? And then it'll just be him to say, yeah, I'm good, I'm going another 10 or whatever.
Well, look at Sam, for example. He goes 82 minutes. Hasn't played that much. Hasn't played that much rugby. So I don't know whether that's just Sam saying, "No, I'm all good," and he's got the okay to play 80 minutes. But you usually see guys with those kind of minutes haven't played that much minutes transitioning that kind of 50, 60 minute mark. But it just comes back to the competitiveness, and Wellington did bloody well to win that game. scoring a try just on full time, and then Peter Umaga-Jensen scoring that try in the last minute. It was a great game.
Mm-hmm. While we were touching on who might play in the USA, do you guys have a look at that USA v Uruguay game where Uruguay came out on top and made the World Cup? They'll play the All Blacks in the World Cup, but probably more importantly, USA, having been kind of shown up by Uruguay, is now going to play the All Blacks, and that could get messy.
Mate, the Uruguay team was solid. Like, they had some really innovative attack. A lot of bodies in motion, and they broke down the American defense with the first try was a player that was hidden in behind the first receiver, and he came from the inside and popped out on his outside shoulder and took a gap there, and then fast ball. They scored in the corner. And then a couple of other ones was just as Bryn alludes to, that down line, and then instead of hitting that player that runs that down line, a guy popping out again from a blind angle and getting the ball and going through a hole. They played, and I sort of was expecting to go to this game and sort of expect a Georgia style, set piece, strong defense, resilient, but man, they've got game. And it was actually an exciting watch, and they're certainly passionate about it. An area of concern, I suppose, for them, they're quite vulnerable defensively, especially in the first leg against the USA on the edge. Broken a number of times down there, and their scrum as well was a little bit sketchy. But outside of that, their breakdown work, their ability to move bodies and get that fast-paced ball, and the willingness to attack, and I suppose the creativity of attack was certainly exciting. And then they even scored a try by rolling up their sleeves and going to that Georgia style that I was expecting. And I think that's another thing to add to what they showed, is they sort of had that complete performance where they could go between the two game plans and had the measure of the USA there.
Yeah.
And Bryn, the USA, what kind of position does this lead them in going into, the biggest test of their year?
Yeah, it's not great, is it? But I think it's a testament to Uruguay and how far they've come in that kind of American competition, how close it is. You look at Chile, the kind of results that they've had and the kind of success that they've had in probably the last 12 to 24 months. And you're talking around Uruguay as well, and the kind of way that they are playing. Chile's very similar. I remember playing them back in 2018. Their kind of style, creativity around their attack structures. Yes, they're not as kind of in depth to like what the New Zealand and the kind of tier one nations are, but their ability to be able to create and have attack and not just going back to that kind of set piece kind of orientated like Georgia do, who've had success in the past in that kind of tier two with those tier two nations. So, but I think for America, I think it's going to be frustrating for them. I think but they still have an opportunity to try. But yeah, for someone that you'd probably think out of that kind of American positioning, that'd be probably the favourites that you think would want to go into a World Cup. But it's just coming back to it's great for the Americans, kind of that competition that the likes of Uruguay, Chile, are improving to get better, and the kind of rankings between those nations are very similar. So we talk around competitiveness in like the Rugby Championship, and you look at the Six Nations, that kind of how level playing field it is. It's great to see that the Chileans and the Uruguay, and America have that kind of same world ranking together, and then have that competition to be able to play an expensive brand of rugby, and it's close, and you can go either way. We see Uruguay go back into the World Cup again.
But you were playing against Chile as a Māori All Black, were you?
Yeah, in 2018. Yeah, we went over, and look, it was a great occasion. I think we didn't know too much about it going over before we went over there to go play them in Chile, and we know that it's a football nation, but we played in a packed stadium with how passionate they were, and that South American feel. Like Argentina, we talk about how passionate their fans are, and the Chileans were exactly the same, and the Uruguay exactly the same as well. So they've continued to get better, and even there were times we ended up dominating the game and winning by a large margin. There were pockets in that game where they played really, really well, and like you said, they have that flair. We talk around Argentina, that flair that they have when they play on top of teams and have that kind of that momentum. The Chileans were very similar, so it's great to see that since 2018, their brand of rugby has got a lot better, and like I said, it's only going to continue to get better with that competition and the fact that they're playing the Americans, they're playing the Uruguay, and those kind of competitions, and they're actually at the same level on the rankings as well.
Ross, I actually think off the back of that loss for the States, the All Black test has come at a perfect time because there's an expectation that they should win. There's a bit of pressure around that performance and preparation, whereas it's on the flip side for them now, and they can almost release the shackles and go into this test match and probably find their mojo a little bit on attack. They were a little bit ones and twosy and didn't really manipulate the defence to create opportunities. And then defensively, they were trying to solve issues on their own, and that's how Uruguay made those breaks, is by bodies in motion, guys running really disciplined decoy lines to create space, and their defence was trying to solve that in ones and twos and flying out and leaving their mate high and dry. So if they can sort their connection in their D system and go and solve the problems together and bring the same line speed and intent and not create the holes, that against the All Blacks, they can probably get a bit of confidence going into their lead into trying to get to 2023.
And I think also, Ross, as well, like take aside the outcome of what that game's going to be like. It's the fact they get an opportunity to play the All Blacks. It's no different from if you think around the basketball terms. The All Blacks then end up playing the Americans in like a World Championship or kind of a qualifier kind of situation. It's having that opportunity to play with the best players in the world and test yourself. And so they have. You're right, Jip. They have nothing to lose. They've got everything to gain. They'll be the complete underdogs, and if anything, if the Americans, with how they are and how passionate they are, and they'll take it as a challenge and will want to embrace the challenge of playing the All Blacks in their home stadium. And so they've had a couple of times in the past where the All Blacks have toured and played there, and from words that I've heard from people playing in those games, the Americans are so passionate and just love embracing the challenge of playing the best, arguably the best team in the world. So that's going to be a great occasion for them, and they'll look forward to it 100%.
Yeah, it sounds like a bit of fun for them. What is a pass mark for them, I suppose, because, the score will blow out a little bit because of the quality and the depth on the bench, etc. But, Chipper, if you were the USA, where would you see a win?
I think if they can get to halftime and touch, and it's tight, they'll probably lose petrol in the tank and the All Blacks will come over the top. But if they can keep it tight, not forgetting that the All Blacks will be targeting that first 30 minutes because it's an area that they struggled against in the Rugby Championship. They created a lot but couldn't finish it. So they had that high error rate early in that 30 minutes. So they'll be looking to really nail that against the States. So if they can match them in that first 40 and keep themselves within sniffing distance and come up with a clear game plan, are they going to pick away at threes or are they going to go to the corner and chance their arm and just stick to it for the whole 80? And whatever the score is, the score is. But if I always thought if your fans will love you if you leave a little bit of yourself out there and you're just completely off your feet. And I think that's where they can gain the most.
Mm. On the weekend, the Farah Palmer Cup final, there was plenty left. There wasn't plenty left out there. In fact, it was a really, really good tussle, wasn't it? Unfortunately, there weren't any of the top-level players. It's probably now a familiar sight for the women's game, just like the men's game, in that you don't see the absolute elite play in the final of the domestic competition. But Waikato came through at the end, and they came through strong in that second half with a great forward pack over Canterbury, who'd won the previous four and probably were down some of their key players. Bryn, who impressed you the most out of that Waikato women's team?
Oh, Victoria Edmonds. She has to be, doesn't she? She has to be. Her end of game speech was one of the classics, and hopefully it gets on the Matty John show or is shown pictures around the world, because it just showed how much it meant to her and the passion that the Waikato women's team had. They've had a lot of, they lost that final last year. A really close one on the hooter, and to be able to come back, and James Semple, you've talked about it, a good mate of ours, being able to, for their coaching staff to succeed down there and to win a game. I thought you're right, Ross. Their forward pack really dominated that second half. If you're talking around championship games and that second half, they just were in their 22, their 5 metre line, just going ball carry after ball carry, making the defence of just keep continuing to ask questions of the Canterbury women's team. And to be honest, they probably could have gone with a yellow card, I thought, possibly with the amount of pressure that they did have, but it didn't come to that. But to say that Waikato would just be able to build pressure and just being able to more so just take the gas out of the Canterbury women's team, because they were defending so much in that second half. And then, even at the back end of the game, Grace Steinmetz has that ball in probably the last couple of minutes, and it just wasn't a good ball from their second five. And so it was an enthralling match, and had it all. And so, but I think for the Waikato women's team, they were deserving of winning that game. And probably the Canterbury team weren't as clinical as they usually are in those kind of moments. I think in probably the last 3 years, in those kind of tight situations, they've shown that they're a world-class team to be able to finish those games with the opportunities that they did have. And so that's where I thought probably the winning and the losing in the game was. The Waikato women, with how dominant they were in that second half, and then probably Canterbury just weren't as clinical as they usually have been. And like you said, with not having Kendra Cocksedge is probably really massive. You're arguably the best player in the world with the women's rugby. Not having her there, I think, was a big factor as well.
I think there's a couple of factors to this victory, and a lot of it does come in the first half. Like Canterbury started hot and scored early, and then the Waikato team actually tried to come out of their 22 and forced a few errors, and then gave Canterbury more sustained possession. But towards that last 20 of that first half, Waikato were just living down the Canterbury end, but couldn't break down that defence. And they went in behind at half time, and you sort of thought, it's a bit edgy here. But that actually did so much damage by sucking the petrol out of the Canterbury team that when Canterbury faced the same sustained pressure in the second half, they gave away way too many penalties. They got 2 yellow cards. And I reckon that was the making and breaking of the victory, is those 2 yellow cards through the work that was done in the first half. And I also think that the coaches inspired or something. The Waikato team came out and they were just possessed. They were winning physical collision after physical collision, and they had that hot start and they just didn't let it go. They just kept coming and coming, and they were relentless about it. And the wind, they had that wind, they had to run out of their 22 in that first half because of how hard that wind. Bryn, you'd know it by training there pretty much every day. And then they turned around and they didn't always use the boot, but it allowed them to actually exit. And then they put their kick chase pressure on, and then their game was too strong when those yellow cards came, and they really dominated with their scrum, and that created the 2 tries. One, obviously, a pushover, and the other one, a pick off the back. So a really great time for that Waikato team, especially for Semps. He's put a lot of work into that. He just gets so much love from all those players, the way he coaches, the way he builds an environment for them to, I suppose, live out the dreams, to represent their community. And they're probably still celebrating now, to be honest.
I think one person as well, just from the Canterbury team that I was really impressed with, was Georgia Miller. Look, if you're talking around a fetcher of someone that can an out and out seven that's going to get on the ball, look, she was outstanding every single time. She get herself in a position to win that ball back. And yes, some of them were for penalties and some of them that weren't. But for me, that was one person that really impressed me with the ability of her to be able to her jackal. I don't think I've seen a person, in that kind of grade that's been able to be that dominant and is so good technically over the ball. So she's definitely one person. She's a young girl as well, and that's come through that kind of Canterbury system as well. So I definitely reckon she's going to be one girl that you want to keep an eye on going forward.
Absolutely. And with Les Elder, I think, is 34 years old. And while she has a huge amount of money and she's an incredible player, you wouldn't, put her into retirement. It shows that the person who's going to take over from her is there. We know who it's going to be, Chipper.
Oh, yeah, it does. I certainly, you'd be a brave man to go and tell Les that she might be time to hang up the boots. She's obviously leading the Black Ferns into this Northern tour, but it's good to have pressure, especially as an older, I suppose, professional. You know people are coming through. People want that opportunity, and it's great to have it at that grassroots level, filtering through into the Black Ferns.
And from Waikato, I thought Tinetti at centre. Goodness, she's got some ball carrying ability.
Yeah, well, I think it was actually set up by I always do this, and I know people probably get sick of it, but they were actually really clinical at the breakdown. So to create the time and space to make good decisions and get the ball to width. And the conditions were tough around the wind, but certainly as an individual, she stood out and she was dominant in the carries and actually made some really good reads defensively. But I always like to acknowledge the work that I suppose produces the fast ball to play off.
Yeah, you'd be kicked out of the forwards club if you didn't do it every single time.
That's why there's a halfback and a hooker. The two much in every team.
Speaking of which, you'll be kicked out of the family if you don't give your cousin Tom some props for the way he played in the Bays, winning the Ranfurly Shield on the weekend over Tasman.
Oh, mate, he was exceptional. Marino Michele too, probably his best game in a long time. Coming up against Shannon Frizzell, he was physical, he was dominant. Stacey Illy is another one continuing his form on from Manu Samoa and is really electric and has the ability of know when to give that pass, when to hold it, offloads, and a lot of those tries from long distance were created through him. But I think this Ranfurly Shield was won on defence, 5 tries to 1, and the big fella TP, Tom Parsons, was exceptional. Twice under the sticks, he won the physical collision to get over the ball, and he must have been watching Brodie Retallick around his approach around that breakdown because the big fella is not short, and that is a long way to go for those turnovers and plenty of levers for people to aim at and clean. And he just did the business. He's been doing that for 2 odd years, and I've been giving him raps on this pod for a long time, but you keep editing it out. So I'm really excited that you brought this up and you can leave this in. So Tom Parsons, outstanding big fella.
Give us some background on this guy, Jeff.
He's recently purchased his own farm. He's grown up in the Waipakaro and has had a number of opportunities to move into super environments. But for someone like himself, he's got to balance it up between obviously running a farm and looking for, I suppose, his aspirations of being a full-time professional. And that opportunity cost, I suppose, hasn't risen. But he did go over to Japan and played some footy over there. I think it was for Toshiba. So he has experienced a bit of footy and a bit of travel. But he's a no mess man, mate. He just rolls up the sleeves, gets it done. And I sent him a text after the game. I said, mate, that was a huge shift. Exceptional effort. Great to see you hold the shield. He just replied, cheers, lad.
I think
that sums him up.
I think it was quite good to see, Jeff. I don't know if you saw it, but him and Alex Nankivell seemed to have a really good tussle. Those two chipping away at each other and kind of getting one up on each other. So, look, I know I actually had him up in my notes as well, but I feel it's very fitting that you'll be able to bring that up, Jeff, because you have been a massive advocate for him the last couple of years. But yeah, I thought he was outstanding on the weekend. He was a talisman more so for them, and in crucial moments as well. Like you said, putting your head in a dark place, multi phases, and be able to have a big play in Ranfurly Shield games where predominantly but a lot of it's based around big defensive efforts. And look, he was at the forefront with that with Makali Tu'u as well. I thought was outstanding, probably his best performance, like you said, with not playing a lot in Super Rugby. But this kind of campaign in the Bunnings NPC, he was immense, and in Flanders as well. I'm a massive fan of Flanders. How abrasive and physical he is. He's in that kind of top end the tackle count every single week, and is great over that turnover win as an explosive runner as well. So, but there is one person I think that has kind of played really well during these kind of first couple of games is Eddie Anadi. You think around Folau Fakatava, who was awesome for them last year and was a massive part of their campaign to be able to get their forwards going forward. And Eddie hasn't had a lot of opportunities due to the fact of being down in Canterbury and with the Crusaders and that. But I think he's been really good for them to be able to have show his ability and how what there was so much talk about him early on in his career through the under-20s program. And so his distribution, his kicking game's getting a lot better with those kind of contestables that tends to be really crucial for the halfbacks moving forward now. But I've been really impressed with his ability to be able to play on top of teams, his pass, and even little touches here and there to be able to put people away as well. So if he continues to go like that, it's going to set himself up really well, and looking forward to see where a Super Rugby opportunity might come, possibly in Moana Pacifica, who knows, with that Samoan heritage.
There was obviously two sides on the field, and I do want to take time to acknowledge something that I picked up, and it was the game management of Mitch Hunt. So in those early exchanges, like the Hawke's Bay pack were just dominant. Like they were dominating every collision, and they couldn't play off that front football that they used to, Tasman. So Mitch Hunt, obviously Quinton Strange going off early was a big factor in that, bringing on Hugh Renton into that lock position. They looked to Quinton Strange a lot as their leader. Him going off early was a factor, but Hunt just took over and they chipped away at 3. And probably the only reason it didn't work for them is that they couldn't exit. They kept making errors in their own half when they exit, but it kept them in the game. So he knew they were getting physically dominated. So rather than going to the corner, he managed that game perfectly to keep them in the hunt, and to go to halftime, only 5 points behind was a massive effort on his behalf as the leader to take the points and chip away at that scoreboard. And then another guy that was really impressive, and although the pack probably didn't dominate, was Shannon Frizzell. His physicality and his energy on the park was massive. So two guys for Tasman that are important and played a massive part in keeping them in touch. But as I said before, those 5 tries to 1, it just was always going to be too much.
Sorry, Ross. No, I just think also just for Tasman as well. I don't know if you saw Jip, but traditionally you look at the kind of Tasman phase play structure, very similar to the Crusaders, and Andrew Goodman has that involvement with the Crusaders, and it just seemed a lot on their phase play attack. Even if they went out the back, a lot of guys were missing lines. They were running over each other. They weren't as deliberate, and the attention to detail in their phase play on their edge attack wasn't to what they usually are. So it was a lot easier for them to defend Hawke's Bay, to be able to defend and put them under pressure. So Tasman are probably going to look back at that and probably want to rectify a few of those things, because look, when they do get that good go for ball and everybody understands their role within that attack shape, it's really hard to defend. You talk around the Crusaders, the Blues run it as well, and even the All Blacks run that kind of similar 3-2 shape, or a variety around that. I just saw one thing there that was with Tasman. It was just a little bit off. So moving forward, I think, because again, they, knowing Andrew Goodman, those haven't had many shoot opportunities, and so whether that was a factor around the nerves and not playing that kind of high pressure game, because I think Tasman as well, they have like a 15 of the last 17 away games they've won away from home. So I don't know if that's the right step, but it's around that kind of ballpark. So going away from home isn't a problem for them. So it'll be interesting to see what their review is, and if they can rectify a few things that they did on the weekend, which they probably thought was a lost opportunity for them to win the Shield. Just with how well, I've been saying that, it was just with how well Hawke's Bay, they won that Shield. They didn't lose it.
The reason why their attack structure struggled and guys missing lines, you know what it's like when there's a little bit of bob of ball or it just slows up in that breakdown area, and guys like Brendan O'Connor, Devin Flanders, Mickey Alitu, Parsons, even Cridge was in there, Ash Dixon's good over the ball, and they're all looking for those turnovers at breakdown, and they really put a concerted effort either to go for it or they just keep counter-rucking, they keep coming at you, and it just, I suppose, stems your flow on attack, because you're not getting that pristine ball that I suppose that Inari was getting for the Hawke's Bay team that set them alight from deep.
They seemed to make wonderful decisions with ball in hand debate, didn't they? Because it wasn't like there weren't Tasman defenders there when they were breaking, especially in the first 20 minutes. But the decision to go inside or outside to the appropriate defender and to the appropriate support player, and there were lots of support players, just made the Bay almost impossible to handle, Bryn.
No, it was. I think if you look at that kind of first half, it was impressive. Going out from like the one where Eddie Inari gave that ball, and they went down the sideline, gets a return back, and they kind of score off that kind of phase of play. It just seems that they know exactly where the ball is going to be, and so that's a confident team. And I think look at the guys that are playing there at the moment, especially in that back line, the continuity and those guys playing together a lot. A lot of them have come through that kind of system for a long time now, and so that cohesion, you talk around cohesion and continuity of playing with the same players, those kind of things happen because you've got that confidence of someone that you've played with and have an understanding where they might be or where they might break or what they're thinking. And so it just looks like that with Hawke's Bay at the moment. They look real confident in what they're doing and everybody's on the same page. And you've got to, give a big pat on the back to that coaching staff there because, they've recruited really well, not only just this year, but probably the last 3 or 4 years. And this has been building. And when you've got a guy like Ash Dixon and a couple of leaders in there that have been around there and have a good understanding around that environment, it just seems to be working in their favour at the moment. And it's really exciting to see Hawke's Bay, and especially coming up from that championship. It seems like they're one of the top contenders in that premiership now, being up there.
So, Bryn, for you guys, obviously there was announced at the end of last week that you weren't going to be in the NPC this season. What does it look like for you now over the next few weeks?
Yeah, it was tough news to hear. I think not only for us as a club, but I think for Auckland and counties as well. Especially when you're working, tirelessly away and having the hopes to be able to come back and play in the Bunnings NPC. It was disappointing for unions, and we know the reasons why. It was tough. There was a lot of things done behind the scenes to try and get us there, but it just didn't work. And so I guess for us, it's just kind of waiting and figuring out what these kind of levels are going to go, what it's going to be announced, and then continually, Jipper and the Players Association and the NZRU will continue to work together to try and get us on the field. So whether that's possible, would like to think so. It could be. Don't know what that competition is going to look like, if it's against Auckland counties and Harbour and we end up playing a home and away series, or it's anything like that. I'm not too sure what the competition might look like for us, but it's disappointing. But again, we know that there was a lot of hard work behind the scenes to try and get us on the field, and just unfortunately it didn't happen for us. But I think it gives more clarity for the other teams as well. It makes it fair for them and to be able to concentrate on their competition, even though it's at a disadvantage for us not being in the competition. But it gives them the opportunity to continue on without us. But hopefully we get to play some rugby in the next coming weeks, hopefully.
What are the options here, Jipper, for those 3 provinces?
Yeah, look, I think the next week's really critical, and working out whether I suppose we can, one, get them training rugby specific stuff, and building towards hopefully a Super City comp that can be fought between the 3 provinces and give them some meaningful footy to finish out their year, and then outside of that, if that's not possible, then decisions will have to be made around what we can do after that. But that's the biggest thing that we're working towards at the moment, is trying to get the Super City comp up and running, so we can get some meaningful rugby for the players, because they're obviously all disappointed and pretty gutted that they can't rejoin the NPC. But as Bryn alluded to, we thought we had a pretty good case to move 3 teams out safely in their own bubble, and unfortunately, the government saw otherwise.
So for you, Bryn, you're down in Christchurch at the moment. You just wait and see, and you come up to North Harbour if and when it happens.
Yeah, pretty much. That's it. It's just it's trying to stay fit as long as you can. It's really easy down here in Christchurch. We're fortunate enough to be in level 2, and a lot of those Auckland boys are still in level 3. So for me personally, it's a lot easier to be able to train with the academy boys down here, and then being able to get to a gym and being able to go to fields without really worrying about that level 3 kind of guidelines and rules. So I'll continue to keep playing fit, and a couple of our other boys are in different spots as well. But I think more so for our boys back home, it's being able to give them the clarity that they need to be able to stay fit, stay motivated, and the sooner the better they can find out that competition. It's going to make it easier to continue for our boys to stay fit and motivated to play some meaningful rugby, hopefully next coming weeks.
Oh, the Koro, are you down there?
Oh well, mate, I'll tell you what. It's amazing how time flies, man. These kids are just so enthusiastic and just have got a lot of energy. So yeah, it's been actually been really nice being able to come down here and train with those boys and help out where I can. There's a lot of great young men coming through, and yeah, it's nice to be able to identify them. And it wasn't too long ago. Well, in my mind, it doesn't seem that too long ago. But it was a little bit long ago now. But yeah, been able to give back and at the same time help them through whatever I can, talking to them, and then at the same time keeping fit and been able to keep the body moving and getting ready for hopefully rugby at the back end of this year.
Just run on.
Now, Bryn's being very modest there, mate. Like he could potentially move into coaching when he finishes his career, because no one works harder with other halfbacks in any squad I've played with this guy. Like he keeps high standards for himself, but man, he passes on his knowledge and upskills the guys below him that are snapping at his heels. Because I think the one thing about Bryn, he's not afraid of that competition. He almost wants it. He needs it, and he feels bringing the halfback group along is pretty important to what he can add to a team. So him having the ability to do that for the Canterbury Academy guys, as much as he'll be getting out of it, they'll be soaking up plenty, no doubt.
It's an interesting point. You mentioned Ere Enade before, and it feels to me like at the moment, halfback is one of those positions where you got to do the time. You think of him, you think of Finlay Christie, guys who've done the rounds and had to wait their turn, Bryn. There's so much depth around. You've really got to soak up the knowledge of everyone around you.
Yeah, it is. And the funny thing about our position is that we're just so competitive. Jib will probably attest to this. Every single halfback that is just that competitive and wired differently. And so I don't know whether that's a good or a bad thing, but for some reason it just seems to be that every halfback's like that. And so, yeah, it is. And I think for Ede, and it's no different from young guys coming through. You start really well within your career. New Zealand under 20s, he was fantastic and had a great campaign. I think it was early on in his career when Drummy had broken his leg and played as a 20 as a 19-year-old straight out of school, and so Razor signed some in the Crusaders team, and then just the fact that Drummy and I we didn't have a lot of injuries during that time and consistently tried to push each other and put in good performances between the both of us. It probably didn't give Eddie a chance, and so a lot of players can take that one or two ways. You can get frustrated with that, and then your performance can go down. And but with Eddie, I think the greatest thing about him is that he's had an opportunity through going to Hawke's Bay and being a number 9, and not to say that there isn't depth in that position in Hawke's Bay, but with the fact that Folau Fakatava's gone and he's playing consistent minutes, he just hasn't had that. For 4.5 years, he'd play Crusaders, wouldn't play that much. He'd go into the Canterbury environment. Drummy would end up playing a lot of those minutes, and Eddie didn't get a chance to start and be able to play well, because I think early in when he played for the Crusaders, he started a couple of games, and he's that kind of guy that needs to be able to play games, and it's probably a little bit harder for him to play off the bench. So he might need to continue to be able to improve his role when he is coming off the bench. But look, when he starts and he knows when he's starting, you're looking at the scenes of what he is in Hawke's Bay at the moment, and so he's really taken his opportunity and taken it to another level with his playing, and is probably gaining a lot more confidence to being able to play and figure out and have time in the saddle in that position at professional rugby. And so it's just going to be interesting to see what Super Rugby is going to look like for him. There's a lot of competition in nines around the country, and it's probably a lot of positions they've taken. So, that Moana Pacifica could be a really good opportunity for him if that is the opportunity he does go that way. It'd be a great signing for that team, especially with a 9 who's still young, but has great potential and great upside moving forward.
Mm. Carrying on that theme of game time, let's look over the Tasman at what's just happened with the Wallaby squad, the 37-man squad that's heading up to the Northern Hemisphere. I think they start in Japan before going into Europe. We've seen some players left out of that squad. Harry Wilson, Noah Lolesio, Fraser McWright, and these are guys who are essentially being left behind who everyone thought these are the guys that they're building for the future, Jipper. It's an interesting call from Dave Rennie to say, hey, you guys have got some things to work on. Stay behind, work on your fitness and work on your skills, and you're still in the line for the future.
Yeah, look, I think there's one thing Dave Rennie knows, and that's developing players and bringing them along in their career and I suppose giving them the opportunity to be the best that they can be for a sustained period of time. And he's also sending a message, I believe, which is key in this new Wallabies team, is nothing's given. Nothing's guaranteed. Everything's earned, and it's a big factor in creating depth and I suppose a want to stay in the Australian super environment to give yourself an opportunity to represent the Wallabies, who seem to be trending in a direction of improvement and potentially, setting themselves to be contenders in 2023. And I don't want to put that pressure on them because it's not fair, and they won't think they're there yet. But these are the sort of signs and I suppose the characteristics and changes in the mindset of this squad that could be key. And we don't, Bryn might be able to allude to this a little bit more, but I think when you're young, you need a big off season, a big lead up. And I think they probably haven't had that for a number of years because they've been in that Wallabies squad, and you do need that mental break. So I think this gives them that mental break, because not forgetting how much MIQ and travel they've had to do to play these test matches. We heard about it when the Perth one was paused, how frustrating it was for them because they feel like they've been on a road a long time. So a little mental window, mental break. But he's also sent them away with stuff they need to improve on. So it's like, yep, you refresh, but your game needs to improve if you want to get back in this team. And then on the flip side, it gives them an opportunity to, I suppose, bring in some experience from overseas to replace them. And Arnold, Skelton, and Latu, who've played a lot of rugby in Aussie, now a lot of rugby up in Europe, and their experience that they can bring against these, I suppose, Northern Hemisphere teams are huge. And by huge, I don't mean in terms of passing on knowledge, but also in mass, size, and getting that dominance in those collision areas, and in an area that seems to have been, really perfected since Dave Rennie's been in there. Their willingness to commit to those breakdowns, their maul defence against the Springboks, their line-out and scrums improving each game. So those three men will only add to that and pass on a lot of knowledge that they can bring back into their super squads going into next year.
Another guy, I'll give you another chance to pump someone up, Jibber, just because that's the trend of the show today. You have gone on about Isaiah Parisi for a while now. He's back in the squad. Where does he fit into this midfield?
Look, I think Ikitel can't play every game, every minute. He's probably played a lot more minutes than he was expecting, and he's built up a really good relationship with Samu Kerevi there. They probably don't want to play Samu Kerevi every minute either. So there is an opportunity in the midfield for him. I think Foketi as well is going on tour. I'd love to see him get a crack, because I think he was really good for Parisi in making good decisions and setting him alight. So I think if Foketi and Parisi can match up in the midfield, it's that cohesion factor that we know so well after speaking to Ben Darwin. And they'll know each other inside and out, and it'll bring the best out of them. But also, if he can link up with Kerevi, I think will be massive for his game. What he can learn off him, during the week, but also, mixing and mingling with him in a test match would be massive. And I don't think it'd be too foreign with where fullback looks like if there's an injury that he pops up on the wing. He's got a real big power game, sort of like Rieko Ioane. He can go between that centre wing position quite easily, I believe.
Well, what about fullback then, Bryn? No Kurtley Beale in the squad. You've got a few options there. You've got Hodge, you've got O'Connor, you've got Callaway. Obviously, with Lolosio not there, maybe O'Connor stands as more of a 10 option. I'm not sure. What do you think, and how do you think that'll go?
Yeah, I think, there's all three options there. And I think, look, I'd probably keep Callaway on the wing just with how well he's playing in that position and what he gives that team. We've talked around a lot, his animation and his roving ability to be able to do that. He could do that off 15, but I just would think the form that he is in the wing, both sides, 11 or 14, it's probably the best position for him to stay there. And so I actually loved James O'Connor, the thought of having James O'Connor there, and what he can bring. Even though he's had little time coming off the bench in the 10 role, but you talk around the two pivots, and we've talked around it a lot with the All Blacks around Richie and Damo, and then obviously Geordie and Bodie. The ability to have two ball makers like that, I think it'll bring their game to light. And because of what I mean around that is that when you have two 10s that have the ability to be able to run a game, have a good understanding, it's going to make your team a lot better. And so we've talked around the improvements that they've made on the edge attack, with how well they've done previously post the All Blacks. I think having him in there, having another general in there, and especially if you're going to see the likes of Parisi and the young guys that are going to come through, the more game management players you can have out there who have a good understanding around the roles and can put players into position and communicate really, really well. That's what James O'Connor can do. But then you've also got Reece Hodge, who played well on that last test match as well. if he can keep continuing to get better in his aerial game and taking those high balls, because that's what's probably going to be coming in the Northern Hemisphere, he could be a guy that they stick with just due to the fact that he's a lot taller and a bit bigger than James O'Connor. But I'd love to see James O'Connor to be in there, possibly against that Japan game could be an opportunity for him to do that. But they've got two good positions with Reece Hodge, who's played a couple of Test matches, and then you've got James O'Connor as well, who's got that kind of dual pivot role, which could help if they do have those young inside pairings of the midfielders that Jipper talks around those players.
What about Jordan Petaia, Jipper? The prodigal son. We've seen him on the wing, we've seen him in the midfield. Apparently, he quite likes the look of fullback. Where does he fit into this Wallaby squad in the short term and the long term?
Yeah, look, I think his last performance on the wing against RG was big, and I think giving him some consistent footy in one position is key for his development. Moving him around in multiple positions, as I think Dave Rennie alluded to, he'd like to see him at fullback at super level before throwing him out there at an international level. And I think he's very fit, he's very energetic, and he's really good off the ball. And we've alluded to the importance of the wingers in the newfound Wallabies attack structure, of them roving and being in and around that breakdown off 9, if there's an opportunity around the heart defence, or creating that extra man on a same way play by working from their blind wing to the open wing, and creating space for others, or getting the ball themselves and scoring tries. What we saw Callaway and Cotton Betty do so well as well. So I think he's best placed for this tour on the wing.
With all of that said, what have we got? We've got Japan, Scotland, England, and Wales for the Wallabies. Bryn, what's a pass mark here for them? Is it a clean sweep as the only pass mark?
Oh, I think the fact that they've just had 4 good Test matches and been able to win there, I think that'll be a goal of them. But I think more so for them, and not knowing Dave Rennie, but just through the way that he's played and his players, talking to players, that he wants to see probably a growth every single week in every single game that they are playing. So you talk around the solutions that they had in the All Blacks Test matches and been able to play against South Africa and Argentina. So it's probably just going to be a continuation of that. And what they have done really well is that they've married up 2 of their styles really well. When they do have the ball on attack, it's been able to be clinical when they have those opportunities to be able to score when they have the points, whether that be off the boot, like we saw Quade Cooper getting those 3 points and accumulating scoreboard pressure, or when they are down there and like what Jip said, with their new phase attack and being able to rove and ask questions of the defence, it's going to be a flow on from them being able to execute under pressure against the likes of Wales and England, who have traditionally good defensive teams. And so, but then knowing that they are going to the Northern Hemisphere and they do kick a lot, so the lessons that they've played against the South Africans, been able to marry up the game between playing a nice fast attack, trying to have a little look. If it's not on, then going back to your contestable games, or Quade Cooper kicking down the middle of the field and being able to exert pressure and build pressure through not playing in your own half and giving away penalties or the intercepts that we saw against the All Blacks. So I think that's what they'll see. They'll obviously have an idea they'd love to go 4 from 4 in that series, but I think it's just a continuation of whatever game they are playing between the 2 styles and marrying that up, and then just being able to execute under pressure and continue to be real clinical like they were in those last 4 weeks of the 4 wins they had in the Test matches.
And consistency, Jipper, is that the other thing for them? Because that's probably be where they've been lacking whenever they've gone to Europe in the past, is a week in, week out consistency, the way that you see from the All Blacks when they tour up north.
I think consistency is key to keep that, I suppose, competition and depth relevant in the squad. Because if they don't have that consistency, then they've got to go to that best 23 every week. And that struggles to bring that competitive edge during the week to then allow them to flourish when given an opportunity. So I think 3 out of 4, they'll be going for 4 out of 4. But obviously their big tests will come against Scotland, Wales, and England. And if they drop one of those games, look, it's not the end of the world. But I think it does set them up nicely going into next season if they can get away with 4 out of 4.
A little bit closer to home, Aaron Mauger, the Moana Pacifica coach. I think everyone kind of saw that coming. I'm not sure, it was one of the worst kept secrets in the country that he was going to be the guy. But Bryn, obviously he's been through a little bit. He came back here as, the next big coach, and then he had his struggles at the Highlanders, and then he moved on. This is a really important chance for Aaron Mauger, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's come at a good time with him. If you think around his coaching pedigree, he's been full on pretty much since he's finished up his rugby career, and it was a successful playing career as well. And so when you're continually, he was at over in the Northern Hemisphere, comes back to the Highlanders, and so it's just been all full on. And reading a piece about him, he had that time to be able to step away and felt like it's a really good opportunity for him to come back and coaching, feeling refreshed and rejuvenated. And so, what a great opportunity to be able to, be the inaugural coach, the very first coach of something so special, Moana Pacifica, who, he's got that heritage behind him as well, been able to be the focal point and the leader of that program. And so I think it's a great opportunity for him. It's a great time for him to be able to reinvent himself and come back into an environment where it can be his and he can run it how he wants to. And so, he was the obviously coached that Moana Pacifica team when they played the New Zealand Māoris, a couple of years ago, and so would have a good understanding of what that cultural aspect looks like. And even though they were in camp for only a week, have a good understanding of what that kind of group needs and can bring the best out of them. And so, it's a great opportunity for him, and just kind of looking forward to seeing who their signings are, because a lot of those guys are going to be from New Zealand, and a lot of those guys are playing in that NPC competition at the moment. So he's going to have some good cattle, but I think at the same time, being realistic around what those aspirations are for that group, probably the first year out.
Jibber, I was trying to think about how you can compare what he's about to do with any other coaching position in the country. And it's kind of difficult to compare it to anything, because brand new players, brand new coach, brand new environment. Maybe an age group team could work in the way that they're going to have to work right from the start, with people being relatively unfamiliar. How big of a challenge is that?
Oh, look, it's definitely a big challenge starting up a new super squad, and then especially coming into a competition as hard as the Trans-Tasman Super Rugby will be, with the improvement of the Aussie sides as we've seen at international level. That'll filter down to them, and we know the high octane footy that the 5 Super Rugby teams like to play here in New Zealand, and then Fiji and Drua as well. With their success at the Olympics and their ability to play and have flair in the 15s game will be exciting as well. So it's definitely not an easy task. One thing I'd say about Aaron Mauger is, as we're seeing with the players that have come out of that Crusaders era, with Leon McDonald and Scott Robinson, is, their willingness to learn and adapt and improve. And he'll take a hell of a lot away from his experience at the Highlanders. And also, I don't think their game plan will be too dissimilar. Like, the Highlanders love to play up-tempo. They love that kicking strategy play down there, but they're under the roof, so they do get the opportunity to play a hell of a lot. And I think that's key, that we see that the Moana Pacifica flair with the balance of playing that territory-based game. And if they can get the right people in the squad, I think he's actually a really good fit for them starting out and finding their identity as a team to then go and execute for a sustained period of time.
Mm. Yeah, getting that team that he needs might not happen first year either, will it, Bryn? It might take him a couple of years to get the right people, because most of the people are already taken.
Yeah, it isn't. I think that's probably the challenge that he will have. It's been able to not have the, if you're looking around the other Super Rugby franchises, the amount of, I guess, depth and kind of backing that they do have. But I think, he'll love that. He'll take that as a challenge, and understanding that, they have the Moana Pacifica team has been able to give, the Pacific Islanders an opportunity to be able to express themselves. And, we've talked around how much they've given to the New Zealand public and worldwide. So I think, it's going to be a great opportunity for them. And I think, it is going to be tough. Like, let's be honest, it's probably not going to be to the extent of like a New Zealand rugby team and how successful they could be. Look, they could, but it's going to be a tough job for them to be able to do that. But I think, it's important to be able to have a plan and a goal for what that's going to look like long term. And hopefully they've got the ability to be able to continue and better. Aaron will be able to build that group, not just 1 to 2 years, it's a 5-year plan. And so you can see the continuation of that team getting better. You look at the Jaguares, who came into the competition and struggled the first couple of years, but stuck at it, and then end up playing in a Super Rugby final against the Crusaders in 2019. So, they do need the backing, and they need to be able to be here for a long period of time to be able to make the improvements and be able to bring those better players, and the high caliber players like that you do, and like you see in the Super Rugby franchises around New Zealand.
The Fiji and Drua have been building their squad over the last little while, Jipper. Their names just being littered out bit by bit by bit. Who's impressed you most from the team that they're building?
Oh, I think it comes as no surprise. It's Rantave from Bay of Plenty, the Bay of Plenty Flyer. He is just something special. And I think the other key signing for him and all the other players that they've announced is Mick Byrne as head coach. I've had a bit of time under Mick and his discipline of training skills and making you a better player than when you came in is huge. And I think that's massive for Ratawe as well. Like you can see that raw talent and you don't want to coach that out of him, but you can see it can be even better if it's harnessed in the right environment. Now, I think Mick Byrne becomes a key factor in their success and making sure that they too play with their style and their flair, but they come up with systems and structures that, we saw the physicality of the Fijian defence. Use that as a weapon, use that as their identity, and also, making sure that they get their kicking structures right, that they don't always chance their arm. That gives opportunities to the other teams. So those two men for me are probably the most exciting that I've heard so far.
What about you, Brent?
Oh, he's good. God, he's good. Yeah, I had those two actually as well. Yeah, I think I agree with you, especially around Mick Byrne. I think Mick Byrne is a great signing there because our time at the Blues, for me personally, not knowing him before I was at the Blues, his actually, for a guy that wasn't accustomed to being a rugby player, obviously played Aussie rules, his attention to detail and understanding of the game. If you're talking around kicking, Jip, at exiting structures, and I think that's going to be an important part for that team moving forward because we know their physicality. You look at the scenes when they played the All Blacks and their flair and their breakdown ability and being able to play a physical style. But I think that balance, we talk a lot of balance in international game at the moment, and Mick Byrne's got a really great understanding around the exit structures and a kicking game plan to be able to implement that with them moving forward, which I think is going to be massive. And I think, you look at him, he went from the All Blacks and then went into that Blues environment and probably would have learned a lot in that Blues environment. You think around a lot of Pacific Islander men were in that team and been able to understand how they work and been able to understand personalities and getting the best out of them. Because I think you go from the All Blacks environment where it's world class and the expectation is you come in there great and you perform great at a high level consistently. Whereas you move down to the Blues and understanding the provincial unions and Harbour, Northern, and Auckland, and understanding that it's not to that extent, and you've got to get those players to play at an ability where they feel comfortable. And so understanding when he was in that Blues environment, has been able to get the best out of the Pacific Islander players, which is going to be very similar going to that Fijian team. I think that experience of the Blues is going to be massive for him moving forward, and taking the learnings that he had in that environment and then being able to go into that Fijian environment, keeping to their culture and what they're all about and understanding what that looks like for them, but then also giving that attention to detail and that balance moving forward, which is going to be really important in the Super Rugby competition next year.
It's almost Ted Lasso-like. Having an Aussie rules guy, although he's really done the time, hasn't he? But it's amazing to think that we currently have one of the top first-class coaches in this competition never played rugby. That's mind-blowing, isn't it, Jipper? It's a hell of a thing.
It is, but man, he knows discipline and he knows what it takes through his experience in another code. And I think he saw an opportunity for the way he saw our game and how the skills could be bettered or I suppose evolve. And he wanted to be part of that evolution, and he's done pretty well, hasn't he? Obviously he's had some successful times with the All Blacks and some successful times with the Wallabies as well, and no doubt he'll be looking for the same here.
Yeah. Really great story. We need to get him on Sky for Playmakers at some point soon because his backstory is an absolute cracker. And I found him very easy to deal with. He spent that time at the Wallabies as well, which would have helped him.
I was just going to say, he'll be up for it. He'll be up for it. He's not short of a word, old Mickey.
He'll give you some pearling stories, man. He'll give you some pearling stories. Jeez.
But he's one of those guys that you could listen to all day, he's just got yarn after yarn.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. I'm sure his players will get plenty of that. And hey, everyone, that's probably us for this week on the Aotearoa Rugby Pod. Plenty more good action coming up in the NPC, and then the week after that, we get back into some international rugby. So thank you very much to James Parsons, as always. Bryn Hall as well. Cheers for all of your analysis again, guys. And we'll see you again next week. And by then, maybe Bryn Hall will have an even bigger beard.
Thanks, mate.